Hello, friends. So, today we'll be talking about the functions of calcitriol as well as its regulation. So, in my previous class, we talked about how calcitriol can be formed. That first, vitamin D will get to the liver where it will undergo a process of hydroxylation catalyzed by 25 alpha hydroxylase to form 25 hydroxy vitamin D, which is something like this. So vitamin D get converted to 25 hydroxy vitamin D, which is catalyzed by 25 hydroxylase. Now, I also mentioned that when enough of this sufficient amount of 25 hydroxy vitamin D is produced, there will be a negative feedback inhibition. So when sufficient amount of this is produced, there will be a negative feedback inhibition. And this negative feedback inhibition is going to act on this enzyme to inhibit this enzyme. So once this enzyme has been inhibited, the conversion of vitamin D into 25 hydroxy vitamin D will be stopped. Similarly, the conversion of 25 hydroxy vitamin D to 125 dihydroxy vitamin D will occur in the kidney, like I stated in my previous class. So it's something like this. So this occurs in the liver, of course, and then this will be 25 hydroxy vitamin D. This will give rise to 125 dihydroxy vitamin D, and then the enzyme that catalyzes it is 1 alpha hydroxylase. So now this 125 dihydroxy vitamin D can also be called the calcitriol. I stated in my previous class that this can be called the calcidiol, while this can be called the calcitriol. I also mentioned that this is the main form of vitamin D in the circulation, whereas this is the active form. So the functions of vitamin D is enhanced by this particular form. So what calcitriol does is it enhances and increases production of calcium in the circulation. So this calcitriol will now result in production of calcium in the circulation. Now, how does it increase the concentration of calcium in the circulation? Number one, it increases intestinal absorption of dietary calcium and phosphate. So we can see it promotes intestinal absorption of dietary calcium and phosphates. So calcium and phosphate obtained from the diet getting into the intestine, it is supposed to be absorbed into the circulation. So its absorption is facilitated by calcitriol. Now, while promoting its absorption, it plays a role in decreasing the pH of the intestine. And how does it do that? So it stimulates the increased expression of transport proteins specific for calcium and phosphates, because the transportation or the absorption of calcium and phosphate is an active process. So because it's an active process, it needs transport proteins to facilitate its absorption. So calcitriol plays a role in ensuring that there is an increased expression of these transport proteins for calcium and phosphate, and by so doing it helps in transporting it. Also, these transport proteins function better in an acidic medium, so they play a role in ensuring that the pH of the intestine is reduced to an acidic medium, and that acidic medium will also facilitate the ionization of calcium. So once calcium is being ionized, its absorption becomes enhanced, or it is easily absorbed in the ionized state. So I'll take that again. I said one of the functions, or the main function of calcitriol, is the fact that it enhances the increased production of calcium. It enhances calcium and phosphate homeostasis. So it triggers the production of calcium. But how does it do that? Number one is it promotes intestinal absorption of dietary calcium and phosphate. So the calcium and phosphate we obtain from our diet are supposed to be absorbed into our circulation. But its absorption, like I said, is mainly an active process. And because it is mainly an active process, calcitriol plays a role in ensuring that there is an increased expression of transport proteins that will help to transport these minerals, calcium and phosphate, into the circulation. And I also stated that these transport proteins function better in a decreased or reduced pH. So they function in such a way that they reduce the pH of the intestine to an acidic medium, and that acidic medium creates an environment for calcium to be ionized. And once calcium is ionized, it is easily absorbed in the ionized form. The second one is it promotes renal reabsorption of calcium and phosphate. So in the renal tubule, specifically the proximal convoluted tubule, the erythroid also plays a role in the expression of transport proteins, because even in the tubule, the reabsorption of these minerals is an active process. So calcitriol plays a role in the increased expression of these transport proteins, which help to reabsorb these minerals back into the circulation. Calcitriol also plays a role in ensuring that these minerals, calcium and phosphate, these minerals are also deposited in the bone matrix, and that is what we call mineralization. So it also plays a role in mineralization of bones. So these minerals, after being absorbed into circulation, calcitriol also plays a role in ensuring that these minerals are deposited. They are deposited in the bone matrix and ensures bone health. When sufficient amount of calcium has been produced, there will be a form of regulation, because production of excess calcium, of course, is going to lead or result in some deleterious health challenges. Therefore, the body must play a role. The body has to function in such a way that it regulates the production of calcium. So once enough calcium is present, or let's say there is hypercalcemia, the calcium or the production of calcium in the circulation has now increased. Once that occurs, there will be a negative feedback inhibition from calcium to 1-alpha hydroxylase. So there will be a negative feedback inhibition, negative inhibition. So when sufficient amount of calcium is produced, it will induce a negative feedback inhibition on 1-alpha hydroxylase. Remember, this calcitriol is what produces or stimulates the production of calcium in the circulation. So when enough calcium is produced, or in a state of hypercalcemia, that the amount of calcium in the blood is high, and at that point the body does not need more calcium, what happens is there will be a negative feedback inhibition from calcium to 1-alpha hydroxylase. Now this inhibition, the inhibition of this enzyme, will prevent 125 dihydroxyvitamin D to be formed. Now in such a case, it can result in the formation of 24, 25 dihydroxyvitamin D. 24, 25 dihydroxyvitamin D. And this is catalyzed by the enzyme 24 alpha hydroxylase. Okay, and this type of hydroxylation can occur in the kidney, in the liver, and also in peripheral tissues. So when this enzyme is being inhibited, it means calcitriol can no longer be formed. And when calcitriol is not formed, more calcium cannot be formed. So apart from the negative feedback inhibition from calcium to 1-alpha hydroxylase, so I also stated earlier in my previous class that an increased production of parathyroid hormone can also stimulate the activity or increase the activity of this enzyme. So parathyroid hormone, an increased production of parathyroid hormone can also lead to an increased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase. So an increased level of parathyroid hormone or an increased secretion of parathyroid hormone from the parathyroid gland can result in an increased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase, and then a decrease in the production of or the secretion of parathyroid hormone can also lead to a decreased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase. So when the body has gotten enough calcium, so in a state of hypercalcemia, apart from the negative feedback inhibition, there will also be a signal that will be sent to the parathyroid gland to reduce or to decrease its secretion. So once the secretion of parathyroid hormone is decreased, then there will be an inhibition of 1-alpha hydroxylase. So there will be a decreased production or decreased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase. This decreased production of 1-alpha hydroxylase, this decreased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase will further inhibit the production of 125 dihydroxyvitamin D, which is calcitriol. Now, once this calcitriol, the production of calcitriol is inhibited, calcium will no longer be produced. That is to say, there will be no intestinal reabsorption of calcium from the diet. Also, there will be no renal reabsorption of calcium. So in the case of hypocalcemia, a signal will be sent to the parathyroid gland to increase the secretion of parathyroid hormone. And so once the secretion of parathyroid hormone is increased, the activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase will also be increased. So once the activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase is increased, then there will be an increased production of calcitriol, which will result in intestinal absorption of calcium and phosphate, renal reabsorption of calcium, And also, there will be release of calcium from the bone matrix. Okay, so the calcium that has been deposited in the bone matrix will now be released from the bone into the circulation because there is hypocalcemia, because enough calcium is not present in the blood, and so the body needs calcium. And because the body needs calcium, first there will be a signal that will be sent to the parathyroid gland to increase the secretion of parathyroid hormone. So once there is an increased secretion of parathyroid hormone, that will result in an increased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase. Now, the increased activity of 1-alpha hydroxylase will stimulate the conversion of 25-hydroxyvitamin D or calcidiol to calcitriol. And once calcitriol is produced, it will begin its function by promoting intestinal reabsorption of calcium, dietary calcium and phosphate, and then renal reabsorption of calcium and phosphate. Okay? But then, because there is hypocalcemia and then the body needs a way to get enough calcium, the calcium that has been previously deposited in the bone matrix will also be released down into the secretion. So, we can say that calcitriol can be regulated by the serum level of calcium as well as parathyroid hormone.